Is Biological Sex Binary or Multifactorial? By Stephen Hupp, from the March-April 2025 issue of Skeptical Inquirer. A pair of talks about biological sex provided plenty of content for discussion, sometimes heated, during CSICon 2024. For this report, I'll stick to the 2 paragraphs per talk limit I set for all the CSICon reporters. Although to help me get through this nuanced topic, I'll cheat a little by first providing a brief description of the article that set the stage for the controversy at the center of the presentations, and add a brief summary of the opening comments during the live podcast taping of The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. In the September-October 2023 issue of Skeptical Inquirer, Jerry Coyne and Luana Maroja, both evolutionary biologists, published an article titled "The Ideological Subversion of Biology," with the tagline, "New dogmas pose a grave threat to science by forcing reality to conform to progressive politics and morals." The article critiques 6 statements, with the first statement being the most relevant to the CSICon presentations. Sex in humans is not a discrete and binary distribution of males and females, but a spectrum. In the article, Coyne and Maroja argue that biological sex does indeed occur on a discrete and binary distribution of males and females based on one variable, which gametes a person's body is designed to make. Males are those with bodies designed to make sperm, and females are those with bodies designed to make eggs. In the article, Coyne and Maroja highlight several additional points. First, they state a small percentage of people are intersex, meaning that nearly every human on Earth falls into one of 2 distinct categories. Thus, in the article, they are not arguing that sex is strictly binary, but that sex is binary for all practical purposes. Second, they state that when others make the case for a sex continuum, they are actually conflating sex and gender, i.e., social identity, adding that unlike biological sex, gender does form more of a continuum. Third, they express concern that some teachers have been unfairly treated for teaching that sex occurs on a binary. Finally, they suggest that while jettisoning the sex binary is meant well, it also severely distorts scientific fact, and all the evolutionary consequences that flow from that fact. On Friday morning of CSICon, neurologist and SGU podcast host Steven Novella opened his presentation by saying, "I love disagreement." He made the case that it's useful for skeptical science communicators to talk through their disagreements with each other, to keep each other in check and hone their science communication skills. He also argued that sometimes the disagreement comes down to semantics, suggesting that at times we're talking past each other and don't even know it. Before talking about biological sex, Novella provided a brief history of other disagreements that have played out in the skeptical community over the past several decades, with the first one being whether skeptics should debunk the existence of God. Other examples of disagreements included topics such as global warming, genetically modified organisms, GMOs, and nuclear power. As Novella turned to biological sex, he indicated that some people do not cleanly fit into one category or another. He used the case of complete androgen insensitivity syndrome to illustrate his point, indicating that people with CAIS would be classified as male when using the definition presented in Coyne and Maroja's article. That is, they have testes, so their body was designed to make sperm. However, their testes are undescended, i.e., inside the body, and their bodies are resistant to androgens, e.g., testosterone. So in many important ways, they develop more like a typical female, e.g., with a vagina and breasts. People with CAIS are often identified as female at birth and may not come to know they have CAIS until they don't start menstruation when expected. Overall, Novella argued that biological sex is multifactorial beyond simply which gametes a person's body was designed to make. In addition to gametes and genitalia, some other facets of biological sex include sex chromosomes, hormones, organs, and brain development. To this last facet, Novella argued that gender identity has many signs of being a neurological trait. On Saturday morning of CSICon, Coyne's talk focused on both biological sex and race, with more time dedicated to biological sex. See Coyne and Maroja 2023 for comments focused on race. Rather than being a response to the Novella presentation from the previous morning, his points were primarily a discussion of the biological sex portion of the article described earlier. His arguments were aimed at debunking the claim that sex in humans is not a discrete and binary distribution of males and females, but a spectrum. He acknowledged that gender is more of a continuum, occurring on a bimodal distribution. However, for this presentation, like the article, he was focused on biological sex, not gender. Coin showed where, in some journals and schools, biological sex is being described as occurring on a continuum. Consistent with his article, he offered the following definition of biological sex. An individual's sex is defined by the types of gametes its reproductive anatomy is organized to produce. Regarding sex, he said that it's very, very close to a binary with few exceptions. And he also added that this is as close to binary as you can get. He argued that people are conflating gender and sex. Lastly, he disagreed with Novella's claim that gender identity is a neurological trait, using the term brain modules instead of neurological trait. Later, on Saturday afternoon, Novella hosted a live taping of the SGU podcast. He took a few moments to reflect on the biological sex controversy, saying that Coin's presentation sounded perfectly reasonable, but also adding, "We disagree, and that's fine." He expressed concern that they were talking past each other, but seemed optimistic they could find common ground. Regarding Coin's response to Novella's position, Novella said, "I don't recognize my position in what he was responding to." Novella said that Coin mischaracterized his position as being that biological sex is a spectrum, adding, "That's not my position." Rather, Novella reiterated the position he described in his talk the day before, that sex is multifactorial. Novella wrapped up these opening comments of the podcast by saying, "How you categorize biological sex is not one objective thing. There are multiple different ways you can do it. You can choose to do it one way, that's fine, but then it's context dependent and you're choosing to do it that way. It's not the way, it's one way to categorize it." In summary, neither Coin nor Novella described sex as strictly binary, and neither of them called sex a spectrum. Conversely, both Coin and Novella described gender as occurring on a spectrum. While acknowledging that people characterized as intersex do not fit well into the sex binary, Coin argued that sex is still best considered binary, especially in terms of evolutionary biology. Novella, on the other hand, argued that there is more to biological sex than how the body is organized, regarding the potential for gamete production. The back-and-forth exchange continued beyond CSICon online. You can find additional comments from both presenters in the further reading section below. Thank you for listening to Skeptical Inquirer Audio Edition. This podcast is produced by the Center for Inquiry at our headquarters in Amherst, New York. If you would like to support our work, please consider subscribing to Skeptical Inquirer magazine at skepticalinquirer.org. It is listeners like you that make our work possible. With your support, we can continue to promote science, reason, and secular values throughout the world. Thank you.